And anyway, good morning, everybody. It's great to see everyone. The sun's out, the daffodils are blooming, so it's a good day. But first, I want to start with a prayer. Dear God, thank you for these people. Thank you for these people who love each other and love the world. Help us to pray together and live together. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, so this is the fourth, right? I'm losing track of fourth class. Catherine's nodding. Yes, thank you. I need help counting. Fourth in our 5-week series on Lent, our Lenten class that Linda and Cleve and I put our heads together and came up with. And just to remind myself and everybody else, so the two ways we are approaching this class are through COVID, right? Remembering it's been a year and asking ourselves, how is Lent different this year? Is it different this year? And what has it taught us? What are the good things that it has taught us? And what do we want to take away? So that's one thread that is running through all these classes. And that's hopefully an active conversation. I hope everybody enters into that conversation with us. And then the second way into this conversation is using Jill Duffield's book, this one here. Sorry, I'm holding up as though, I don't know if you can see with the glare, Lent in Plain Sight. Sorry, the glare is really bad. There, that's a little better. And Duffield has taken the weeks of Lent and used everyday objects as points of meditation, for lack of a better word, and everyday objects that in particular, right, occur throughout the Bible. And then she's taken each day of the week, of those weeks, and tied each day to a different verse associated with those very simple objects. Her point being, and maybe our point, not maybe, definitely our point being that Lent and ways into Lent are all around you. And so I guess my hope for this class and for the other classes is those objects that are around you all will become moments for meditation for everyone. So the objects we've used as our way in so far were dust. I was lucky to have dust. I was very excited I had dust. There's plenty of that in my house. And then we talked about bread. Again, a daily, use that word, object, coins, and now shoes. So here's our class, right? Lent is letting go. And Lent at this moment. So objects, everyday objects, as I said. And as I said, I hope the objects that are around us become really occasions for prayers. I'm thinking about, I think one of our classes we mentioned the bell ringing tradition, right? That we don't have anymore, the Angelus bells, Vesper bells. So I'm hoping objects like bread or dust, right? When we encounter them, which we do every day, or maybe every minute, become opportunities, I don't know, for meditation, for prayer. You'll notice sneakily in this image, right? One thing we can see about this person are the shoes on his feet. So that's where I'm going, shoes. They're everywhere, at least in my house, with a lot of people and a lot of feet. We've got shoes piled up in literally in piles in our closets. I don't know if you all are the kind of, where your shoes gather at the front door, you take them off when you come in the house. So we've got literally I've got very nice little boxes where the shoes are supposed to go, but no, they escape the boxes. And we have shoes like in the boxes and then overflowing on the floor around the boxes, by the front door, by the back door, by the baby gate, where I thought baby gates were done in my life. Oh, but we have a new puppy. And so by the baby gate area into where the puppy lives. So there are lots of opportunities for prayer in shoes in my life. So I hope there are for you. Okay, so when I realized I was going to be talking about shoes today, I thought, okay, well, I mean, there are so many different kinds of shoes. It's the first place I went, and a shoe for every foot, right? And at this moment for us in our country, we are very, very fortunate. We, most part, have, like probably most of us, many, many pairs of shoes. That wasn't always the case, and it still isn't the case for many people. But I liked this image as a way of thinking about the diversity of shoes, how many kinds there are. And I don't know if that's a resonant image for you or a resonant idea, but maybe it's an idea of thinking about the different ways they mean for us, what one pair of shoes says to you versus another pair of shoes. Of course, the first thing I thought about, one of the first things I thought about when I realized I'd be talking about shoes today, I went here. I thought, oh, that's not where I want to go, right? Shoes as a sign of indulgence or luxury or overindulgence. Imelda Marcos's 3,000 shoes. I don't know if that's something that still sticks in your minds, but that's a place I didn't want to go. So those were all the first things I thought when I put my brain to, okay, what am I talking about today? So shoes. So I want to think about shoes again. This is the way Duffield does. I want to think about shoes as a vehicle for prayer or meditation, and in conjunction again with this idea about how have our prayer practices changed during COVID? How has the way we've lived changed during COVID? The things we have given up, maybe the ways in which we've simplified our lives, thoughts about what we value that we hadn't noticed before. So I hope, again, I want to use shoes as a vehicle to ask some of those questions. Okay, there. Pause from the slideshow for a second. So as I said, for this class, Duffield and all of us, Linda and Cleve and I, were then tying these objects or following Duffield's lead to use these objects as tied to places in the Bible where those objects appear and how they resonate through this tradition, through this book that we've been reading collectively. And I think that's important to say too, especially this conversation we're having, or I want to have, that there are very few things that we all share as much as we share the Bible. So here's a question. Are there, for you guys, are there places in the Bible where shoes are mentioned that are meaningful to you? I bet a lot of them are some of the ones that Duffield brings up, but I'd be curious to hear.
Well, I have two images. One is, I guess it's John foretelling Jesus coming and saying, I'm not fit to wash his sandal or wear his sandal or something. He says something about, sorry, it's too early. Anyway, something about the sandal of Jesus. And then of course there's the washing of the feet that Jesus did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought of both of those. Yeah, yeah, thank you, Margaret. Others that are meaningful to people? They think about shoes.
Where he tells somebody to knock the dirt off your feet from the village and go on your way.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. I do too. Yeah. And both those verses, yeah, we're going to talk about today. Duffield touched on both of them. It's just, I find it interesting what resonates with folks.
Mm-hmm.
Others?
I'm always taken aback by the fact that they didn't really wear shoes. They wore sandals or abbreviated things, which are very alien to me. I never have worn a sandal in my life that I didn't feel like my toes were getting beat up. So it was a little tougher life, I think, walking around in sandals.
Yeah, and maybe just a difference of landscape too, right? I mean, here it's like, even though spring is coming, it's still a little chilly. I suppose if I lived in a warm desert-like environment, like when I'm at the beach, like the few times I might wear, so it may be, but yeah, shoes, sandal, I'm using the word sort of interchangeably. All right, well,
sorry, in one sense, shoes mean experience. Walk a mile in somebody's shoes. What is their experience? How do you experience that? It's something that actually touches the earth, that you're wearing. It's grounding you.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, I agree with both those things. The idea of, the first point, what is it like to live from someone else's point of view or to understand someone else? We certainly see a lot of that in the Bible. And then your bit about the touching the earth. I see there's some verses that address that, and we're going to go there also today or this hour.
And there's also the command in Exodus for Moses to take off his sandals because he's standing on holy ground. So there's a place where your real feet need to touch the ground, not be separated by the shoe.
Yep. And Duffield goes there, and we're going there too. I'm thinking about what you said, Linda, in conjunction with what Bob said, that, the idea of the ground and feet, because as soon as I think feet, I think foot, and I think ground, and Duffield takes us there also. Well, that's awesome. That's lots of stuff. Well, I think you guys named every verse that we're going to talk about today. So let me jump back into the slideshow, unless there's there are many others. When I looked up shoes in the Bible, there are others. Shoes are there a lot. All right. So I thought I'd start thinking about, if we're on a journey, we're walking somewhere together, I'd start. And I'm not going from Old Testament to New Testament. It's all a mashup today. I wanted to start with this from Mark and read this. I'm going to move so I can see my screen a little bit better. Okay. Take nothing for the journey. So these were Jesus's words to the 12 disciples. He called the 12 and began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over the unclean spirits. He ordered them to take nothing for their journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in their belts, but to wear sandals, and not to put on 2 tunics. And then going on, he said to them, wherever you enter a house, stay there until you leave the place. If any place will not welcome you and they refuse to hear you, as you leave, shake off the dust that is on your feet as a testimony against them. So they went out and proclaimed that all should repent. They cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and cured them. So that's where I wanted to start. And I just want to repeat the words I want to pay particular attention to. He ordered them to take nothing for their journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in their belts, but to wear sandals and not put on 2 tunics. I love the specificity of that. Take nothing. I know when you guys hear those verses, are there associations you have with those directions? What do you take away from those words? Any thoughts from anyone?
Sounds like a nightmare to me. No money, no credit card, no bread, no extra food in case it rains. No extra clothing in case it rains. I'm releasing myself to, nightmare scenario in most circumstances for us.
Yeah. I don't have many calluses. Other thoughts?
You know, I notice, in a sense, a reference to Noah sending them out 2 by 2.
Yeah.
Then the whole thing about taking nothing, in a sense, the whole idea of Jesus' ministry is starting anew, of forgiving people's sins, bringing atonement to the world. They start out with nothing and they go from there. And it's kind of we're free to begin again.
Thanks, Bob. I agree. And yeah, I love the 2 by 2. I heard that Noah echo as well. I like that. And I like something about what you said reminded me, or the idea of bringing some of the things you don't bring with you, like in addition to not the bread, not your bag, not your money, which implies, I suppose, or at least where my brain goes with that, is God will provide for you, right? That idea. But what you said, Bob, the idea that don't bring your, I don't know if your grievances with you. Leave it all behind. That idea, leave that kind of thing behind.
It echoes, it's like the call, like Jesus, you know, take up your cross and follow me. And then the rich man, sell everything you own. It's a constant thing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, I like how, go ahead, Margaret. I'm sorry.
I also like what Jay said. Like, we usually pile up our cars to go even on vacation. We take a lot of stuff, but like he said, just in case. So this is pretty radical. I don't know anybody who does. I mean, this is basically you're not to have anything. I mean, it's hard to, it's very countercultural to our life. So.
Yeah, no, I like what you have said or started to say. It's very hard. Like the idea, we don't do this, right? Get rid of my stuff. It's hard to get rid of your stuff. But I guess the point, right? And as you said, Margaret, this occurs in so many, this message, right, occurs in so many different ways. You know, and I'm just thinking about COVID teaching us maybe what is the stuff we don't need.
Well, I think COVID has helped, but that's why so many people are angry and agitated. It makes them anxious because we're not used to giving up.
No.
To doing what we want when we want and more of everything, not less.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, well, Jesus isn't easy. That should be my theme song. And then the second half of this, which I just echoes some of what we were talking about before, what Nancy reminded us, you know, this other half of this same passage, again, walking, and then you think about what you're touching, and then the dust of your feet. If any place will not welcome you and they refuse to hear you, as you leave, shake off the dust that is on your feet as a testimony against them. I love the idea of dust on your feet, the act of releasing, you know, kicking off the dust as a testimony. That's powerful language. Nancy, what does that mean for you? That's what came to your mind first.
Yes, it's a strong sentiment without saying anything. It's, you know, okay, you won't listen to me. I hear what you're saying. You're not hearing what I'm saying. And using your feet too. It's not, you haven't done with your hand. You haven't said, okay, go away, or I'm going away, but you kick off the dirt on your feet. I mean, that's kind of harsh when you get right down to it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like what you said at the beginning, the idea of it says it without saying it, or it says it without words. You're right. The person isn't speaking thoughts, they're enacting them.
Yes.
And you're right, it is pretty harsh.
It also carries on the idea in the first cited passage, in that you are not only are you giving up all of these things you normally would think you were going to have, but you don't accumulate any ill will. You don't take with you the trauma of someone rejecting you. You shake it off and move on.
Yep.
And that's great advice, I think.
Would the modern equivalent of that be, I've washed my hands of that?
A little bit, yeah, testimony. I like, that's a powerful word. Almost as a sign, right? But yeah, Bob, I think, I like how one word refers to another, or how one object, just like, again, this pair of shoes or sandals means differently. And I like how all these places where that object occurs in this book mean differently. So again, I'm thinking back to the piles of shoes in my house. I'm going to look at those shoes and maybe I'll remember one message, one verse is giving us, and then look at them another time and they'll resonate another way. Just the way Margaret was saying, or Bob was saying, how one verse of the Bible speaks there.
But to Nancy's point, I found it so harsh, because when you talk about your feet in that way, you're almost saying that these people are beneath you. Mm. They've rejected you, and now you're showing them. You're dusting them off, and you're walking away.
There's that anger there. Shake off the dust. But moving on also to Jay's point. Well, one thing I like, speaking of the way the verses in the Bible speak to each other, I like looking at this verse and seeing how much, like this verse, how it's been read and reread. So that's the one place, as you guys maybe know me, where I went next with this. So let's see if I can get my slide to do what I want it to, my PowerPoint to do what I want it to do. Well, there, that's just a reminder of where we went last week with the dust. Sorry, but which again resonates with the whole conversation we had about that object. But I think we've talked about that, so I'm going to move on to this. And I love how, objects or verse in the Bible are reread. So here's Maya Angelou's book. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this title, Wouldn't Take Nothing for My Journey Now. I love the rewriting of that phrase. And I love this image. I don't know if you can see the photograph of Angelou here on the right side with her suitcase, complete with suitcase, right? So she's, just coming back from her journey or heading off on a journey. A younger Maya Angelou. I'm used to seeing her later in life, but here she is as a young woman. And this book essentially is a series of self-reflections that she wrote. But her, how that verse in the Bible resonates for her. So again, that just speaks to me about how this book, right, keeps speaking to us and speaking to us again in different ways. Here's another place I went. Recommend that all of you, for those of you who don't know this awesome song, to listen to it afterwards. That we hear these verses so many places. And that's a really popular and well-loved song where they've taken that same verse and reclaimed it. I don't know if there are other songs or verses that have been converted into music, or whether that's the song that well, maybe I should just start with this one. Is that a song anybody's familiar with? All right. One thing that struck me both about Maya Angelou and the Oak Ridge Boys was the emphasis on the word nothing, and the idea that the journey itself was so valuable that you wouldn't exchange it for anything in the world. A different reading of the same line, right? I wouldn't take anything for this journey. I wouldn't take nothing for this journey. Which is just another way of looking at the same verse. When I read it the first time, I always think about the idea of what do we have to give up? Take nothing with you, leave everything behind, which is, I guess, what COVID has brought us to or helped us see. So here are the questions as I think about it. What do you want? What do you need? What do you not need? And what would you take? Or what wouldn't you take? As Angelou and the Oak Ridge Boys are saying, wouldn't take nothing. All right. Complete change of gears here. Here's another verse. And this is, reminds me, this is, so piggybacks on what Linda talked to us about last week with the time we spent thinking about bread. So I'm going to read this verse from Exodus 12:11. This is how you shall eat it. Your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And you shall eat it hurriedly. It is the Passover of the Lord. So the idea of being in haste, maybe being in exile. And again, the sandals on your feet, your staff, again, those two objects again, your staff in your hand. I don't know when you all read this passage, and Linda, I know this is something you spent, walked us through last week, and where I guess 2 weeks ago, where we spent some time. What associations folks have with this verse?
The thing I like about it, and it sort of goes well with the verse we just did, because it is being ready to go. You don't even wait to put on your shoes. You have your shoes on. So as soon as you've eaten it, you can act.
Yeah, I like that. I read that as well.
Jennifer,
yes.
I'm reminded of when you're on a long road trip and you stop for lunch and you eat. The driver has to eat in the parking lot. You don't go in, you eat in the parking lot, and once you get done with your burger, you leave, because you need French fries while you're driving. Everybody else in the car can eat while they're riding along, but you don't spend a lot of time eating. You grab it and you go.
Yeah, eating on the run, and and how that's not ideal, right? But the idea that you don't stop, keep on going. Sometimes when you have to eat that way. And the idea of, and these lines also were spoken, right? This need was in exile, the idea of being exiled with God. For me, I hear all those things when I think about this verse, which leads me to images like this. This was one of the many, these are refugees in Europe, camped out under a bridge, as you can see. But I think about that this verse takes me here. Your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it hurriedly. It is the Passover of the Lord. I like those words in conjunction with this image. And the power of that word, it is the Passover of the Lord, the idea of haste, necessity. I'm going to move on to the comments from anybody. They want to jump in, give folks space to talk.
Yeah, I wanted to make one comment. I was focusing on the staff. First of all, walking in sandals isn't easy, so you probably need a staff. But second, it signifies the difficulty of a journey. If you weren't going a long way over difficult terrain, you probably wouldn't need a staff. And, so the combination of eating hurriedly with sandals on your feet and having a staff in your hand all carries this idea of hurrying on a difficult journey, a difficult road.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I agree. Other thoughts? So maybe if the first verse, Jesus' words to the disciple, ask us, how you journey or what you take with you on your journey. Here also it's there's the how, it's also who, right? Who's with you, who's going, who's in exile. Maybe the next verse is where, right? And this echoes a verse that, Linda reminded us of, the idea of shoes, with the shoes and with the shoes off. These words from Exodus. Then he said, come no closer, remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And that's certainly a verse that I think for all of us really resonates in our imagination. This image of Moses standing before this bush, which is on fire and not consumed. Interestingly, I found that same different versions of that in different places. Here from Joshua, this idea of holy ground. The commander of the army of the Lord said to Joshua, remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy. And then again in Acts, then the Lord said to him, take off the sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. And so shoes, again, we're just remembering our object. I'm reminded of the wearing of them, who wears them, what are you doing, how are you walking in them, and then the removing of them. And in this context of where we are now and thinking about the ground itself being holy and our responsibility to the ground, to the earth, the conversation we're having about how are we stewards of the ground, and what's a holy place? What does that mean?
We can point out that Muslims do not wear shoes when they're in a mosque.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there are piles of shoes there. Yeah, or in cubbies. Yeah, that idea. Thanks, Fred. So here's my, what's holy ground? How do you walk there? What does that mean? You take off your shoes when you pray? Is this a holy place? What about this? Or is this holy? Sometimes we I guess, prioritize, is that the word? One place over another. What does that mean? What is holy ground? Where's God? What's holy? Those are all questions that verse makes me ask. I don't know, thoughts from other folks?
Jennifer, Jim Palmer put in the chat this message, the shoes of the fisherman. The title comes from the fact that Peter was a fisherman, that he was the first pope, so to speak, and that Cyril, the protagonist of the shoes of the fisherman, was the metaphorical task of filling the shoes once worn by Peter.
Oh, thanks, Jim. That's awesome. You want to say more about that?
Not really. But I was just, the issue of we came up earlier about the issue of, filling someone else's shoes, mm-hmm. and walking in, it's an empathetic reaction. You're feeling what someone else feels, or experiencing mm-hmm. what someone else feels.
Yeah.
And I think that becomes a very important piece of this particular phrase.
Yeah, no, I agree. The act of empathy. And then as I was also hearing, as Lynn read what you wrote, the idea of responsibility, right? Filling shoes, which has all that built into it. Whose shoes? Take us back to the, John the Baptist talking about, we're not worthy to untie the thong of his sandal. So I guess that's where I'm going next. In fact, I think about it, who, right? So how are you going to walk? What are you going to take? Who's walking? Where are you walking? who's walking again, who, this verse that, so 4 times, right? In all 4 gospels, not everything repeats in each of the 4 gospels, but that line does. Mark, Luke, Matthew, John, each of them. Here are the 4 verses. I'll read them all, see how similar they are. The thong of his sandals. So here's Mark, the earliest one. He proclaimed, "The one who is more powerful than I is coming after me. I am not worthy to stoop down and untie the thong of his sandals." And then Matthew, "I baptize you with water for repentance, but one who is more powerful than I is coming after me. I am not worthy to carry his sandals. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire." Then Luke, "John answered all of them by saying, I baptize you with water, but one who is more powerful than I is coming. I am not worthy to untie the thong of his sandals. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire." And finally, John. "John answered them, I baptize with water. Among you stands one whom you do not know, the one who is coming after me. I am not worthy to untie the thong of his sandal." So in the case of Mark and Luke and John, it's that image of untying the thong of his sandal. Matthew gives us carrying his sandals, but it's the same message in each of the 4 gospels. This, when you ask people about shoes in the Bible, I think this verse, right, really resonates. And as you said, you can see it here in all 4 of the gospels. I'd love to hear thoughts if anybody wants to share them, reactions to this verse, these verses.
Well, as a spin-off of the verses, I might point out that shoes are a metaphor within, I guess, all of Middle Eastern society and possibly going back to ancient times. The shoe or the sandal is the lowest part of a person. Polite Arabs don't cross their legs and show the bottom of their foot to their guests because that's an insult. Remember the incident where somebody threw a shoe at George Bush. Fortunately, he ducked, but that was a very similar ascribing of this lowest of possible things about you. And I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm just noticing that.
I'm going to jump in on that theme. It just reminds me of a story. I had Afghan clients, and there was a rule that if our feet touched under the table while we were talking, everyone immediately stopped and shook hands, because it was if you kick somebody under the table, it was an insult unless you immediately apologized and said it was okay. And it's sort of taken on a habit in my family. I do it occasionally now.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I love how meaning becomes encoded in gestures. I mean, there's so many things that we have built into our culture we don't even think about. But to echo both of you, the idea of the foot is the lowest part of you. And I think, Martha, you were the one who I think talked about washing of the feet, right? How that act is so powerful because of what, is built into the fact that the foot is the dirtiest part of you. Supposedly it's what touches the ground, and somebody who would wash somebody else's feet, right, is an act of love, of humility, right? To touch that part of someone's body has all that rolled into it.
Jennifer, got a couple of comments in the chat. Excuse me. Laura said, I can't think of a pile of shoes without thinking about the exhibit at the Holocaust Museum.
Yeah.
And then the other one from Margaret, Frederick Buechner wrote, thus, when you wake up in the morning, call by God to be a self again. If you want to know who you are, watch your feet, because where your feet take you, that's who you are.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you, Margaret. Where your feet take you, how you act, how you move. Those are both beautiful. All right. Here's another verse I went to. The idea of shifting from Jesus, which I guess we're all, not even I guess, we are all asked to do. From him to us, what can we do? Put on whatever will make you ready. Here are the words from Ephesians. Stand therefore and fasten the belt of truth around your waist and put on the breastplate of righteousness. As shoes for your feet, put on whatever will make you ready. Proclaim the gospel of peace. Whatever will make you ready. I love the responsibility of that. What do you need? Whatever you need, whatever shoes work for you. High tops, high heels, whatever will make you ready. I like the power of that. No, you know, in the breastplate of righteousness, it seems to go with it. Yeah, back to that image, right? A shoe for every foot, whichever one you want. Just get ready. Shifting the responsibility to ourselves. I know that verse says that to me anyway. Reactions from other folks to that verse. Maybe I'll go backwards so you can see it.
There's an encouraging phrase for people who can't get going, and that is put on your tie-up shoes, put on your lace-up shoes. It tells your body that you're ready to go. Don't wear your flip-flops. That's not going to work, you know. The 3-inch heels aren't the right thing, but your tie-on shoes, your lace-up shoes will get you going.
Oh, I like that. I haven't heard that one, Nancy. Thanks. Associations for other folks? I just like the idea of get ready. Okay.
Like those other, they're very clear direction. It's like there are not a lot of adjectives or whatever. It's like act.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's we try to make things complicated. This stuff, these are like clear directions of how you're supposed to live and what you're supposed to do. I mean, people, it's just interesting. They're very active statements.
And I agree. I like how, Margaret, you're saying the simplicity of it. It's like, you don't need to make this complicated. This isn't complicated. Yeah, no, I like that.
And I think it's that idea that shoes are they're that official outdoor thing. You know, if in many of the Middle Eastern cultures, you do take off your shoes when you come in, as you do in the Asian culture. And so they're what protect your feet from thorns and from hard stones that might interrupt you or get in the way. So as Margaret said, it's simple. It's, you know, don't do whatever it is that's going to make you focus, leave you free to focus on what you're called to do.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah. Other thoughts about this one? Mm-hmm. All right. So this is where I went at the end. This is a poem by Charles Simic, and I'll give you a better here. In fact, I'll just do this so that you can read it better rather than having to strain over the image. Charles Simic is a Yugoslav, I guess American these days, but he was born in Yugoslavia, lived there for the in his childhood. He grew up there, came to the United States, went to high school here in Chicago, and has lived here ever since. Writes in English, and is a very, very powerful, one of the most powerful voices, I would say, of this. I don't know what to label it, but he's a powerful voice. And I love this poem of his about shoes. When I was noodling around getting ready for this class, I found this poem, and I've always loved Simic, but I'd never read this poem before. And I am just very, very happy to have found it. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this website, it's a great website. The Poetry Foundation has now got this wonderful endowment. So it's this wonderfully robust resource for poetry. So if you just type in Poetry Foundation, you'll get there, and you can search by poet, by theme, and by age. You can just, anyway, it's a really robust resource. And so that's where I picked up this poem from Simic. So I'll encourage you to listen to Simic. Possible to read the gospel of my life on earth and still beyond of things to come. And hear his action right in this penultimate stanza. I want to proclaim the religion I have devised for your perfect humility and the strange church I am building with you as the altar. Again, more action, and I like strange church, in the strange church I am building with you. Or is that you again? With you as the altar. And then finally, ascetic and maternal, you endure, kin to oxen, to saints, to condemn men, with your mute patience forming the only true likeness of myself. And I love how that last line echoes, lines we can think of from the Bible. This whole, I don't want to shrink this poem. I know it's unfamiliar, so you're just seeing it for the first time, but I find it a powerful, again, revisiting of this image, echoing some of the same things we've been talking about.
Can you tell us a little more about Simic, or are you familiar with where's he coming from here?
Well, he and I link you, I'm not even going to try, my internet capabilities. I said he was from Belgrade. He fled when the country was falling apart, literally. Came here, and his writing is both. You see influences of both his Serbian roots and his American life from high school onward. So his formative years, as a young child, were in Belgrade, and then from high school on, he was here in this country. And so he writes these very powerful, image-driven, psychologically potent poems, and has taught all over this country at major universities. He has powerful things to say. So you can easily find, he's got collected versions of his work, easily accessible. This is typical of him.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you read these shoes as baby shoes?
Well, he calls them my shoes. So are these, I assume you're asking about my brother and sister who died at birth.
Yeah, I'm trying to see where he calls them his shoes, or maybe they were all of the children's shoes.
Yeah, like the image Laura's reminding us of.
Yeah.
Holocaust Museum. My shoes, and maybe all shoes are his shoes. Maybe that's right there. Poetry works. I think this poem, Simic, is particularly good at this, about capturing the ambiguity, right, of a word, and how it both are true.
Right.
I think it's a beautiful poem, but I think it's also very interesting. It's the past and the future. Yeah. Like, it's very interesting to talk about your siblings who died, but he's talking about his current life. Mm-hmm. Like building the church.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the power of memory. Like, he hasn't forgotten his siblings.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I like what you said, Margaret, the past and the future.
Right.
And the past definitely influences his life. It influences all of our lives. How can it not? All right. Go ahead.
Sorry. Going back to COVID, I would say the shoes that are the only true likeness of myself from this past year are house slippers, because those are the shoes that have gotten all the wear. Everything else has stood in the closet, and they have come to symbolize this is the shoes you put on when you're at home, when you're safe, when you're away from everything else. And I think I'll always look at these house slippers and say, these were my COVID shoes.
Oh, that's awesome, Debbie. Thank you. Yeah, you look at an image in a different way. Yeah. The shoes of COVID. What does that mean? All right, well, I am aware that I am over time. So here's some shoes, the ones we began with. And I don't know, back to this whole conversation that Linda and Cleve and we're all having together, So for shoes, how will you walk? What will you take with you when you walk? Where will you walk? With whom will you walk? And I'm sure there are lots of other questions we asked, but those are some of them. So thank you, everybody. I thought this was a great conversation. I really appreciated hearing from everyone about what the words, your ideas about all those words that we talked about, those images, that image, shoes. So I hope when you see shoes at your front door, when you see shoes in your closet, when you look at your bedroom slippers, this conversation is becomes a way in, a way to pray. So thank you all.